everybody, and welcome to the special edition of Sportview. My name is Jay Wyman. I'm here with my co-host, Tom Emmons. Hey, Tom, good to see you again. It's been a while since we've done a show. Yeah. But this is a very special show. We have an incredible guest on today, Ken Dunn, who has written the ultimate history of Holliston football books, and he's going to talk to us a little bit today about this book, the first book he did, the updated version to that first book, and a new stat book that he has specifically for Tom and I to work off of. So, Ken, welcome. Thank you. Welcome up to Massachusetts. Thank you. First of all, Ken, we want to thank you for all the work you've done. I know all the coaches really appreciate it. The old-time players appreciate it. You know, I play a lot of the softball in the Old Man's League here in Holliston, and a lot of people talk about the book, and a lot of those guys, you know, had their name in the book. So, you know, it'll be exciting to see. We'll talk today a little bit more about what's different between Volume 1 and Volume 2. And then we'll go into the stat book, which is really a lot of fun. It's not just for Tom and I. It's out there for everybody to use. Great. Great.
Yeah, well, tell us a little bit about how this project got started and, you know, maybe in a summary form, get us the background history. I mean, this book is fantastic. Over 800 pages of Holliston Panther football history. And from what I can tell, the people I talk to, there's no other high school program, at least in Massachusetts, that has a book that puts the history all in one place.
Well, the reason probably for that is because it took me 5 years to put it together. And so I started this back in 2013, and it was around Thanksgiving of that time. And I think this came out in 2015 or 16. And just compiled everything I could find, went into all of the libraries, the other schools, and the other programs that I could get people to send me information on. And you're right, none of the TVL teams really have these kinds of records. They don't have records that go past really the year 2000 or 1990 for the most part. You can find scores, but that's about it.
Mm-hmm. But you didn't just, I mean, you kind of went over that pretty quickly. That didn't happen that quickly. I mean, you got to realize that you're in there looking at all kinds of microfiche, right? You're looking at all kinds of records, got things out of yearbooks, gone to different schools. So it took, do you have any idea how many hours, thousands of hours? Or?
I did figure out for the first edition, when I finally published it, I added up what looked like about 1,200 hours of work. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I took full vacation weeks and came up here and went into the libraries and started when they opened at 9 o'clock in the morning and stayed until they closed at 9 o'clock at night, and would take little 15-minute or half-hour breaks for lunch and dinner. And it was just a long, drawn-out affair, but once I started, I couldn't stop, you know, and I was getting into all of the articles, and then you have to read all those articles, and then you have to decipher the information. Then you have Framingham News in the old days, and you had the Milford News together writing about the same thing, and then their numbers didn't quite equate. So you had to start figuring out whether this was right or this was wrong, or, you know, and so I just put it all together as best I could, and it's all in there. And I know the scoring statistics are correct. I know that the touchdowns and the 2-point scores and all that, but the yardage things, I had to dig much deeper to get those, and that was very interesting to go after those.
But just as an initial project, you know, sounds simple. Just look up the games, look up the newspapers, you know who covered it, and every season's got 10 or 11 games, and just find those 10 or 11 articles, and then you're all set, right?
Except when there's a snow day. You know, it snows on Friday, Saturday, so they move the game to next week, or maybe it's your off week, or it's the weekend before Thanksgiving when they weren't playing that weekend. Now they play that weekend if you're in the playoffs, kind of thing. So I put all that together and did my best with everything. And actually, I think we got very accurate information, even with the Gary Alger yardage things. That was something that I kept fighting for, because I said, I know he has to be one of the highest yardage guys. And we finally figured it out that he was over 3,000. We just don't know how far, you know. So putting it together was not simple. It took really about 4 years to do that for the first edition.
And then you started back in, what's the first year you cover?
96.
1896 to, was it 25 or 26 when they stopped?
Yeah, 1925, but that all came about when I was working my way backwards. That's how I started this whole project. I said, well, I'm going to find out how many championships we've won, because nobody knew. So I started in, at that time, 2014, 13, and started working my way backwards. And it was easy in the beginning, and as you worked backwards, it got harder. If you had a losing season, the papers don't follow you very much, so that became more difficult to find those numbers, but you just keep punching your way through. And if you go to the schools that you were playing, to the newspapers that followed them, so all of the TVL teams that aren't in the Middlesex News or the Milford News, you got some that are over in some other, to us, obscure papers. And I just kept finding those and then going into those libraries that put a lot of mileage on the car, spent a lot of money. So people need to buy the book.
Right.
Because I need to recover my money.
Well, first of all, when you say a lot of miles on the car, you do not live in Holliston, right?
No, I live in North Carolina.
North Carolina. So when you say I'm giving up a week, you're giving up a week.
That's right.
We got to thank your wife, too, the lovely Marty, for this, because
yeah.
she allowed you to do this. So you'd come up here from North Carolina and take it from there, too, right?
Yeah, yeah. I always spent at least one full week here. And I would go in first to the Framingham News and do all the years I'm looking for. And then I would switch over to the Milford Library to try and capture that. And then what I couldn't find, then I would go on to Google and find out what newspaper covers that town. And then I would go to that library, wherever that is, and find out. And then I went into Boston to the large library and had to wear white gloves and pick up, that was a whole different thing, because I had to get a library card. And, they don't give it out to people who live in North Carolina. Yeah. So I was living at my brother's address.
I want to get into an immigration discussion right here.
But I was living, I got through my brother Bobby in Hudson.
Yeah, he was in Hudson.
I got his card use and did it that way.
Excellent.
Now, another inspiration for the book has got to be noted. You are a 1976 Holliston High School grad that played for Tom Cato, who arguably put Holliston on the football map in a big way when he came in the early 70s and had that state championship team right there. I mean, that was football heyday for you, 76, me, 78. I mean, it really inspired the entire town.
Well, it was interesting. I was always a football fan. And my brother played high school football in New Jersey before we moved here. And I went to all of his games. So I was a little bit of a fanatic already. And then we moved here in 1970. I was in 7th grade, going into 7th grade. And I started going to the football games. I lived on Colt Spring Road. And on Colt Spring Road was the McGrath family and the Peterson family, all of them in football, all playing under Cato. And we found out right away that we had a great team. So I said, well, I want to go to those games. So I went to those games, and they were just dominant teams. And Coach Cato was ridiculously good as a coach and as a guy, just a good guy. And so I only had one kidney. I couldn't play tackle football, so I went out and kicked as a kicker and as a punter. And
you kick straight on, though, right?
Yeah, it was a straight on.
Yeah, me too.
Old time, old time.
Me too, yep.
And although we'll talk about the guy that was the drop kick specialist, which I also did that, but he wouldn't let me do that. But I went out and did that for a little while, but I was pretty frustrated as a player. And he just put his arm around me and said, don't worry about it, we're going to get you in and we're going to make you, you're going to participate with the team, you're part of the team. And that's the way all 120 some odd players felt back in 1974, I think it was. Every boy in the school wanted to play. And Cato made sure there were enough uniforms for everyone to be on the field on Saturday. And a lot of players had the same number as somebody else because you only have 99 or 100 numbers.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think anybody wore 00, but you know, and it was just cool being a part of the team. So.
Yeah. Well, that was the experience with me and freshman in 1973, in the fall of '73, class of 216 total, so 108 boys. 76 came out for freshman football. Amazing. An incredible number. And I think we were wearing some of the helmets and stuff from Fred Cutler's team in 1925 that were still there in order to outfit us for the day.
And that's why you and I were on the same field, but we didn't know it because there were too many of us, right?
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was probably, I guess I would be a sophomore or junior then, and, you know, I was just on the kicking squad. Yeah. And that we had a whole different practice regiment, except for the sprints. We all had to do those sprints. Right. And if there was a mud, you know, you had to run into the mud and jump in the mud. We all had to do that. But that was fun.
But Coach Cato really got the town fired up about Holliston football. And then you, following from North Carolina, we're seeing the success of the Panthers since Todd Kiley's taken over, and, you know, Super Bowl championships. And like you said, you started the question, well, how many championships has Holliston won? Yeah. Now there's a big gap in there, you know, that you went back. Meeting the coaches and personalities of these teams, how many of the coaches have you talked to that are still with us?
I personally interviewed, so I've talked with Todd, obviously, Ed Buckley from the 90s, sort of a little bit. I had a telephone interview with Bradford, Bob Bradford from the 80s. I have not found McEwen or McGowan, however you say his name. I haven't found him to be able to talk to him. Then, of course, I was going to talk to Rowles, but he died. Cato, we've recently had a great time with. And then I just today had a great conversation with Vincent Messina from the 60s. We haven't found Bebo, and then we didn't get a shot. I had a telephone interview set up to talk to Insulaco, and then he suddenly died. So we sort of lost out on him. So, but Vincent today, I was with him for lunch before we came here today, and the guy is 86 years old. He remembers all of his players, remembers their names. He's attached to the numbers on their jerseys. So he can look at a picture and say, that's from 1965, and that is whoever. And he'll tell me all about the family, the kid, and what his favorite things were, and what his gifts were, and how good he was, or what he did, and how fast he was. And he really seemed to have a special touch with, I can't remember the guy's first name, but Roth from the middle 60s. He said he was our little shotgun guy. He ran faster than anybody, and he was telling me a couple stories about him. But he just knows all his players. So we were sitting at lunch today at the Holliston Grill, and one of his players walks in, and Scott Carey, and he just started talking about, you know, Vince, it's great to see you again. And I'm listening to them. It was just amazing listening to them.
Now, the story of Vince Messina is one of the additions to the second edition.
That's right.
That section. And what a great mind, football, community involvement mind, plans that he had that really launched the heyday of football, and still what we see out here at Committee and Field. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, Vince came out of the Coast Guard and became the coach while he was coaching in another school, and then they got him here in 1964. And he was the football coach, the phys ed teacher, the director of athletics of some kind. There were a bunch of different hats he was wearing. And he built the team back up and got to a relatively good record, 6-3 in 1967. But by that time, he was burnt out because he was doing so much. And he was also involved at that moment in time with the entire design of the high school athletic fields and the field house that we know today.
Which is the new high school we're in right now. Is
That's
still
right.
in it. This was designed and built in 1968, 69.
Yeah, and so he was designing that, and he took a lot of grief apparently to try and get that field house, because he had this idea that the entire town would benefit and all of the students would benefit from a field house as opposed to just a basketball gymnasium. And
so the one that encloses the track that we see?
Yeah, yeah. So that field house was built so that his football team could practice in there on really bad weather days, really bad winter days. The basketball teams, they could have multiple practices going on at one time. And then it was for the community to have, on the weekends, they had the ability of, I guess people were able to come in and they had basketball leagues, they had, you know, adult leagues, they had volleyball adult leagues, they had tennis going on in there, and all kinds of things going on in there. And he has a whole philosophy on that that's different than your typical football coach. And he had a dream and an idea for athletics at Holliston. And in truth, the field house enabled all of the sports teams to really practice throughout bad weather. And it really helped all of the athletic teams in the school. So he has an amazing idea on how athletics should be used in high school. So
I just made another connection. Him starting in 1964, Vincent Messina. 1966 was the first year of the Tri-Valley League.
Correct.
Was he also involved with the moving from the South Central League and the combining the new towns together?
Yeah, he was apparently heavily involved in that since he was the athletic director. He was also the phys ed guy and the football coach, and I think he might have been assistant coach or coaching other sports too. I think baseball he was involved in too, with Krupnik, and so he was involved with a lot of that, and from what I understand, he did sort of help bring that about with the Tri-Valley League.
And the Tri-Valley League, we've seen now grow exponentially. I mean, it's huge now. We're getting. We have,
Norwich.
Of course, Dedham was joined last year. Norwich joined in this year, right? And now they have 2 divisions, and it's really grown up, and it really is in their for the size of the schools, arguably the best league in the state.
Yeah.
And then Messina, Vincent Messina, his parting gift to Holliston was finding Tom Cato down in Rhode Island with his friend Paul Rowles.
Yeah, he explained how he sort of burned out on he was here late nights, every night, all kinds of events. He was here on weekends, organizing the adult leagues and things that were going on, or getting ready to do that. And so he sort of burned out on everything, and he was the one who hired Tom Cato. Then Tom Cato helped him find Coach Rowles, who became the AD. And there was another one that came in. Oh, Jim Riley came in with through him. He hired Jim Riley, and it's just when you think of those 3 guys, and Dave Stone was already here. That made Coach Cato just enormously successful because he had such a supporting cast.
And he's another one too. We met him at the book signing. And you talk about somebody who remembers everybody, and I was so amazed. Like somebody would walk in and same thing. Oh, how's your sister so and so, and how's your brother so? Now he had what, like over 100 players on his teams. You guys were talking about.
Yeah, every year.
That is absolutely phenomenal when you think about that.
And he was the one who started the sophomore teams. So you had a freshman team that was started by Messina. And then Cato brought the sophomore team in, and the sophomore team was always playing divisions above us because there weren't many divisions at our level that were playing with sophomore players. So they had their own sophomore team.
So
I played sophomore football.
I played sophomore football too, and
and the JV. sophomore and a JV?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Wow.
Juniors,
14.
only juniors on the JV. There were a few sophomores that would jump up.
Yeah.
And, you know, no seniors on JV, but there were juniors and some sophomores. But he tried to keep it so that everybody was getting every week a certain amount of playing time. By the time you were a senior, if you hadn't figured out the system, it probably wasn't smart for you to stay.
Right.
And they were also, you were either offense or defense. Very few guys played both offense and defense. And that a little bit of a bone of contention when you start to talk to some of the old-time players about those Cato teams. There's that feeling that they could have been better if some of the couple of the key players had been allowed to play both offense and not defense. But Tom Cato's philosophy was, nope, I want them to be rested, I want them to be focused, and that's the way he got the involvement and success he had. But,
And they didn't get hurt as much.
Right.
So they weren't playing tired in the fourth quarter of a game that probably was already won anyway. They were playing a lot of the sophomores and juniors in most of those games. So.
To get back a little bit to the specifics, the first edition of the book, fantastic stories. Every single game is covered in that, isn't it?
Yeah, we just summarize each one.
Every single game. And there's names and a little story about the games, most of them, and then, of course, the stats and everything. So we had a whole bunch of people bought those books. Now we come out with the second edition. What's the difference between this and that, and should people get this if they have the first edition?
I think they should, obviously.
Well, you would.
But the reality is that there's 94 corrections in the new book. Everything from spelling of names or people's names that I got wrong. You know, I had the last name right, but the first name was wrong. I don't know what I was thinking. And I know how I missed it, because when you proof it, you just read right through it. That's the
you read
name,
what you
right?
wrote. Right.
Then there's also there's some more scores in there from the old era. There's a total write-up on Vincent Messina that I did a 2-hour interview with him before the book on the telephone, which is that is very important to where we are today. You wouldn't be here today with this success, I don't think, without his mind and his vision for all of sports at the school here. So, and then I really filled in all the blanks for 1964 through 67 because I finally found him. And for the most part, the stats have been totally corrected and completed in this book, and then I extend them in the new book.
And you had the 2017 season.
Yeah.
2017 season's in there.
Okay.
And some new pictures, too.
And I changed all the format of everything so that and I condensed pages got rid of some blank pages that I was, for the ease of reading kind of thing. And then, so there's actually 25 to 30 more pages in this book, even though it only looks like 5 or 6.
So, but we want to let people know that don't wait for next year for the third edition, right?
Yeah, look, we've completed what we're going to complete, and for now. And a third edition's quite a ways into the future, because something special is going to have to happen, or I don't know how we're going to do that yet.
So if you want the whole shooting match, you want to get the second edition.
The second edition, yeah. It also includes a lot more of my information on, like, rushing yardage guys, where I found John Burke in 2000 through 2002 or 3, and his amazing numbers. And then I discovered, Frechette we already had, and I'm trying to remember the names now, but the second guy that was in there, Belomo.
Matt Belomo.
He has he had a ridiculous year in 2004, 5, 6, somewhere in there. He ran for 1,750 yards.
Oh, wow.
He ran for 200 yards 4 straight games, and 5 games, I think, that season.
And those were games we were covering back then.
Did you know what he was doing? I mean, that was crazy.
But until we got together with you and saw the book, you really don't put everything into perspective like that. You do if it's the pros, and you do if you're following Ohio State. Right. You know who the great ones are. But until you get this and you see it, this is why I've read the first edition. I read cover to cover. I also read Bill James' book cover to cover. So I'm a pretty boring guy, but I read it cover to cover, and it's amazing how when you start putting into perspective what the Zach Elkinsons of the world did, and I know, and even some of the old timers I know, I happen to know Henry Bullard.
Yeah.
And who was just an incredible, incredible athlete. I mean, if he played today, you know, we'd be writing about him like Zach Elkinson and those guys. And it's a lot with a lot of those guys. Now, we met Gary Alger, same situation. When we're doing, I don't know about you, but when I'm doing it, I don't put it in perspective. I didn't put it in perspective, but now I do. And now it's like, you know, you can say, well, Matt ran for 200 yards, over 200 yards 4 times, and okay,
in a
big
row.
Deal. But then you step back and you think about it. How many times does anyone run for 200 yards, period?
That's right.
And then you see he ran 4 times in a row, and, you know, probably not all against Dover Sherman. So, you know, you look at this stuff and you say, wow, what incredible athletes. That, you know, and that's where anybody who played the game or had kids that played the game or grandkids that played the game or something, if you get this book, you may not be like me and read cover to cover, but you'll start reading it, and then you'll start seeing the history behind it. It's kind of a Ken Burns type history behind it, where you're giving not just the stats, but here's the storyline that goes with it.
Yeah.
It's really incredible. It's a lot of fun, and it's a book that we'll get to. I guess in a few minutes we'll talk about where people can get this, because it's really important that they do.
Just go ahead and plug it now.
Okay, so.
Well, I just dropped off the new 2nd edition and also the stat book at Fisk's General Store. So he's got some signed copies of these.
Here's the stat book. I don't know.
And as they sell, he'll order more. And you can also go onto Amazon and order them yourself just by typing in the title. And, you know, that's where you get them.
Or typing in your name as author.
Yeah, you can just type in, but you got to put Kenneth R. Dunn into it, because there's another 2 Ken Dunn authors. There's a Kenneth Dunn author, but if you punch it in,
they're just hacks trying to live off your success.
No, I had to use my full name because everybody else used my regular name. So,
well, let's segue to the stat book, because. You know, as you were saying, Jay, usually you're reading the stats and you don't know the story, and that's why these two go together. This is the story about the games and the people who played the game, and then this book is the one that brings what we're sort of familiar with, the numbers. You know, who had the most, what team allowed the least amount of points, and what are the records that are out there, and. You know, again, in starting this, it sort of sounds simple. Just go get the stats that are out there from all these great coaches that you met, right? And just slap it together in a book, and we're off to the races, right?
No. So the stats from before Kiley. So if you're before Kiley, whoever was the ADs prior to whenever he started, I guess the coaches they all said the same thing. I left my stats at the school with the athletic director where they belong. I don't know who to blame or not to blame. I don't know if there is a blame anywhere, but something happened, and they purge all those records and all that stuff. So all of that is built from a few stat pages I had, and also from newspaper articles. And everything that I put in here, I was able, so once I figured out all the touchdowns and how the scoring went and all the kicks and all the field goals and extra points and 2-point conversions, I was able to do all the scoring stats. Then I had to go trying to do yardage stuff is really crazy, okay? So you start adding up some years with, you know, in 5 of the 9 game articles that you had for whatever season, they gave you the rushing stat for somebody. And when you already know that the guy's up to 800, and then you know you got 50 over here and 40 over here because that was a touchdown run. So you go through each touchdown. So all I did was those numbers that you see in there, some of them that aren't complete, but we know a 1,000-yard rusher because we know that there's 5 games that told me he had 680 yards for those games. Then I read the other games and see that he had a 70-yard run, a 55-yard run, and I added it up. And when it went over 1,000, I said, that's a 1,000-yard rusher.
Right. Yep.
But we put 1,000-yard, an asterisk, and a plus sign that said he had over 1,000 yards, but we don't have a real number there.
Right, right.
And that's how we got Tony Matchek, his passing records from 1972. He was the first guy that I know of that went over 1,000 yards passing.
Wow. Well, that's some of the ones that I highlighted in here. Obviously, the modern game that we see right now, much more passing than it was back in the 70s, but certain things that just jump right off the page at you are the record for most touchdowns in a single game. Two of them we covered, which is 2000. No, we didn't cover each other. Covered 19, but 2013, Matt Jay threw 5 against Medfield in a win, and in 2014, Nick Athey threw 5 against Hopkinton. But in 1972, Tony Matchek threw 5 against Ashland.
Right.
Uh-oh.
Ooh. That's you.
Now, you didn't play in that game, Jason. Not any of
Even
your
if I
playing.
did, he would have thrown 6 if I played.
Do you
That's funny.
Have you got any anecdotes about that 1972 game?
I can't remember the details of it, but actually the details will be in here.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why that's the companion book to this. Right. This gives you the story and how everything happened and how every score happened and how the game progressed and if any storyline was in that game.
Well,
and then that tells you where the records are.
So what you want to do is you buy this book, learn all the records and everything, then you buy this book and take it to your local place wherever guys gather and you know, in this book it'd be cool, like the night before the Thanksgiving Day game, when all the kids come back and I had the greatest. Okay, let's look it up. Let's see what
if it
you
really did.
And it's a lot of it I found in going through is I remember him, or I was watching football about that time, and you know, last names match. I wonder if that's so and so's brother, you know, connected to certain people. And
do you have in here who has called the most touchdowns on TV?
Oh, dear. No.
You got to be up.
But
I
got to be up.
I would have to think the two of you are there, because
I don't know. Bill George and Jerry Kiley might have something to say about that.
Well, they would anyway. They'd lie about it. Though. We beat them.
But if you look in there, we have the team records, and if you look at the scoring,
you'd know
for team, you'd see that Kiley's teams have exploded the scoring statistics, except with a 9-game season, Cato's teams have great scoring teams. But, you know, when you're winning a lot, you play 13 games now. So, and all that's broken down. I break it down to most points scored per game in the season, most points scored in a game, biggest point differential averages, most point differential games. So I went through the whole thing, and I did not have a computer to do it with, although I had all of it checked.
Yeah. I want to get back to talking about Gary Alger a little bit. I mean, not only is he a statistical marvel, I mean, he's listed here, career rushing touchdowns. 1969 to 1971, he scored 40 rushing touchdowns, which is a record that stands today, which is amazing in itself. Given that it was back in the 70s. But we also met him at the book signing. What a great guy he is. I met some of his teammates, talked to Coach Cato, and we found out about how Gary Alger sort of came to be, as it will, behind the story. And the first thing that amazed me was that the coaches, when they picked him out of the line, they put him in the linemen's.
Oh, yeah.
And he was ready to quit football.
Right.
Yeah.
He was ready to quit football if he didn't get to play running back. And Cato relented.
Well, he had legs that even when I was playing sort of around him, he was a senior and I was sort of like an 8th grader, 9th grader, and we were watching him. His legs were as big as my waist at the time, it felt like. And he was strong. And there's a few pictures I've got of him in that book, in the stat book. I was trying to get a good picture that would show the strength of the legs. And when the 2-point conversion record holder, Fred McGrath, a name that nobody knows, right? He has the record for most 2-point conversions in a season and for career. And when I called him and finally got him, he says, yeah, but that was because I had Gary Alger blocking for me. He's the fullback. They're all trying to get him, and I'm just following him in the end zone.
First of all, he scored 40 touchdowns. There's 40 opportunities to get the 2 points, right?
That's right. That's also true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, there's a great compilation of the old and the new as you go through here. I mean, most points scored in a single game. Zach Elkinson, took 2 of the top 3 places. And, you remember those games,
Well, one of them was the Super Bowl, right?
Both of them were playoff games.
One of them was the Super Bowl that they...
He had 6 touchdowns in a game against Scituate, which we had out here in Comedian Field. He scored with just seconds to go in 2013. One of the most exciting games that we've covered, although I think if I said, oh, that's the most exciting, I'd be pressed to get a top 10 of exciting games. But 2014, the Super Bowl at Gillette Stadium, 5 touchdowns against Wacona. I mean, that was amazing.
And none of them short, were they?
No.
They were all long runs.
Yeah.
And the little backstory there was, again, there was an injury. John DeCarmo had hurt his arm against the playoff game the week before.
That wasn't Linfield.
Linfield against Linfield. So they had to put another junior tackle in place, practiced all week with him. Coach Kiley, in the middle of the night before the game, just changes the blocking scheme. He says, no, this is how I want to do it. He looks at the film again against Wacona. He says, I'm going to change the blocking scheme. So as they're on the bus, he's talking to his tackle, his end. He changed the blocking scheme that they had practiced all week long, opened up 5 touchdowns.
43-0, right?
Yeah, amazing.
Maybe he should do that more often.
Well, I'm sure he does, and it doesn't work out like that, and so it doesn't end up as a great anecdote for
They
scoring.
certainly had to work out enough, I'll tell you that. Well, Ken, thank you very much for coming. Once again, talk a little bit. Where can they get the book at Fisk's?
You can get it at Fisk's, and when he runs out, he's going to order more.
And you can get it at Amazon?
Amazon, just
looking for Kenneth R.
Dunn, D-U-N-N, or just type in the name Holliston Panther Football, and you'll see them all pop up.
And you want to get, when you're buying the books, you want to buy both books, because you want the story behind the story. And you want the little pocketbook to take, like you said, take the game with you. We'll have this. We'll have this up in the box with us, but no one's going to be allowed to see it but us. We'll have it up there. But people want to take
Christmas
the games.
and birthday present.
Yeah, you know what?
The Panther
stocking stuffer.
Yeah.
There you go.
Big present. But thank you very much for coming. And I'll tell you, I can speak, I'm sure, for all the Holliston football fans and players and coaches. We are so happy for what you did and so proud of what a great job you did. And you should really be proud, too. It's a heck of an undertaking, and I'm glad people got to see how much time and effort you put into that book, because it's amazing.
Another plug I'm going to put is that you are also, in your spare time, Holliston football history on Facebook.
Facebook page, yeah.
And, so if you've got the book and you've got the stat book and that's not enough for you already, go ahead on Facebook, put Holliston football in there, like Holliston football, and Ken does a great job of keeping up all the regular articles that come across his desk, and again, phone calls that he gets. Hey, I got a phone call from this player at such and such a time that remembered the 1972 team, and he's great about writing that in there. So it's a living history that the more you put this out there, the more stories that start coming from the past, and it really gives it a lot of flavor and enjoyment for the whole community.
Right. And every season has an album that has every picture of every article that you can actually read, and all the pictures that I'm getting from everybody.
And you can contribute to it.
That's
right. And in looking at the pictures and liking on Facebook, you can contribute with your own anecdotes to that and be a part of the success story that is Holliston Panther football.
That's right.
So thank you again.
All right.
We really appreciate it. Thanks for coming up.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marty, for letting us have him over your vacation time. I know time is tight, but we thought it was really important to get the information out about this and to show everybody what a great job you really did.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, that's it for this version of Sportview, and it looks like in about 5 weeks we're going to be out, Media Day, And right after that, it was August 31st is the Legacy Bowl, and then the fun starts. So for Tom Emmons and for all of our crew, Don, Bruce, and the lovely Lisa, thank you all very much, and we'll see you soon.
Good night, everybody.